Good afternoon, everyone. Today I will discuss to you the Unit for Learner-Centered Pedagogy, Intended Learning Outcomes. First, discuss the nature of learner-centered teaching modalities, structures, methods, and strategies that facilitate differentiated teaching to suit learners' gender, needs, strengths, interests, and experiences. Next, to select appropriate learner-centered teaching modalities, structures, methods, and strategies based on learners' diverse needs, learning styles, and backgrounds. For example, linguistic, cultural, socioeconomic, and religious. And lastly, to draw on appropriate learner-centered teaching modalities and strategies to formulate teaching procedures that address the special educational needs of learners in difficult circumstances. So Unit 4, Learner-Centered Pedagogy. Learner-centered pedagogy follows a constructivist approach. Thus, it places students at the center of the teaching, learning process. Students are more active and participative, and the process turns knowledge into a negotiation between teachers and students. Furthermore, this pedagogy starts from students' interests and objectives, and it carries out a learning process based on real situation and materials, using the current technologies to favor the process. This type of pedagogy encourages debates, discussions, and critical thinking between all students. So learner-centered pedagogy creates an environment that speaks to the heart of learner. It encourages students to deeply engage with the material, develop a dialogue, and reflect on their progress. It represents a shift away from the sage on the stage mentality and puts the students learning at the center stage. As a students gain greater access to information, it is the educator's role to guide the application and assimilation of that information into real-world problems. The foundation of learner-centered teaching is rooted in a constructivist framework of learning theory. Constructivists postulate that humans are perceivers and interpreters who construct meaning from new and prior experiences. So instructional design should therefore focus on providing tools and environment for helping learners interpret and multiple perspective of the world in creating their own world. So next, delivery of modalities. So there are four delivery of modalities. First, the face-to-face or the traditional face-to-face learning. Second, the blended learning. Third is the technology-based online e-learning. And lastly, distance learning. So face-to-face or the F2F. This refers to learning delivery modality where the students and the teachers are both physically present in the classroom, and there are opportunities for active engagement, immediate feedback, and social-emotional development. Face-to-face learning is an instructional method where course content and learning material are taught in person to a group of students. This allows for a live interaction between a learner and an instructor. It is the most traditional type of learning instruction. Learners benefit from greater level of interaction with their fellow students as well. In face-to-face learning, students are held accountable for their progress at the class-specific meeting date and time. Face-to-face learning ensures a better understanding and recollection of lesson content and gives class members a chance to bond with one another. Face-to-face learning is essentially a teacher-centered method of education and tends to vary widely among cultures. Many modern education systems have largely shifted away from traditional face-to-face forms of educational instruction in favor of individual students' needs. Next, blended learning. This refers to a learning delivery that combines to face with any of a mix of online distance learning, modular distance learning, and TV or radio-based instruction. Blended learning will enable the schools to limit face-to-face learning, ensure social distancing, and decrease the volume of people outside the home of any given time. Blended learning, also known as hybrid learning, is a method of teaching that integrates technology and digital media with traditional instructor-led classroom activities, giving students more flexibility to customize their learning experience. Although there are four basic models of blended learning, the possibilities are endless when it comes to ways in which instructional technologies can be blended into teachers' pedagogical approach. The flipped classroom, for example, is one of type of blended learning model in which students view lecture material prior to class, then spend class time engaging in exercises under supervision of the teacher. So in general, blended learning refers to the following. First, some learning happens online in a format where the student has control over the path and pace at which they engage with content. Second, some learning happens in an instructor-led classroom. Third and last, online and in-person learning is a complementary, creating a truly integrated learning environment. So next modality is the teaching-based online e-learning. So learning in which teachers use technology to teach and learners learn with aid of technology. Learning can happen everywhere at any time. In addition, and largely due to the learning curves introduced by technological advancements and industries, including entrepreneurship, learning isn't limited to educational settings. Within educational realm, teachers are embracing new technological tools and using them within their teaching practice. These tools help contribute to new learning approaches and learning preferences, while the increasing number of new tools and technologies may seem overwhelming at first. Educators understand the benefits of instruction led by this new technology. Older teaching traditions are being left behind or supplemented with new teaching practices, allowing students and teachers to become better equipped for emerging, interconnected, and technologically influenced around the world around us. Last modalities is distance learning. This refers to a learning delivery modality where learning takes place between the teacher and the learners who are geographically remote from each other during instruction. This modality has three types. First is the modular distance learning or the MDL. Second is the online distance learning or the ODL. And lastly, the TV or radio-based instruction. Simply put, distance learning is when students are separated from teachers and peers. This means that students learn remotely and do not have face-to-face learning with instructors or other students. Distance learning actually relies on the educational tools of online learning, and that is probably why there is some confusion between the two. It is possible to study with online distance learning as well. In that sense, distance learning is a subset of online learning because distance education is remote. It can connect students to universities worldwide, making it more accessible for students in different countries. It is also known to be more affordable, which is another factor that helps make education more accessible to many students around the world and different socio-economic levels. So here are the references of my discussion. So thank you and God bless.
Good day, everyone. I am Marjigan Oswazo, and my topic is all about the structures for facilitating learner-centered teaching. Learning to teach is a lifelong process. To become an expert teacher is a complex, multi-phase process that continues throughout the individual's professional lifetime. It will require several different kinds of knowledge through knowledge of subject matter, knowledge about schools and classrooms, within them, a knowledge of learners and an understanding of how teachers can help in this process. Next, the different structures of facilitating learner-centered teaching are categorized as follows: formal education, alternative learning system, and alternative delivery mode. Next, first is the formal education, or what they call traditional education. Formal education consists of systematic instruction in universal knowledge and skills provided at prearranged times and places by specialists. There are cultural differences in the institutionalization of formal education. In the organization of the educational system, the relation between public and private schools and the length of compulsory schooling, the number of years of elementary and secondary schooling, the school curriculum teaching and instruction. Traditional education is also known as back to basics, conventional education, or customary education. Again, the traditional education is also known as back to basics, conventional education, or customary education. It refers to long established customs that society traditionally used in schools. Some forms of education reform promote the adoption of progressive education practices, a more holistic approach that focuses on individual learners' needs and self-control. This focus on rote learning and memorization, which must be abandoned in favor of student-centered and task-based approaches to learning. Teachers are the instruments by which this knowledge is communicated and these standards of behavior are enforced. Next, traditional education teachers employ the following to facilitate teaching and learning process. The first one is the traditional teacher employ lectures as the most important and effective tool of teaching. The second one is the simple oral recitation, where learners sat quietly at their places and listened to one another after another recite his or her lesson until each had been called upon. Next, the third one, assigning and listening to these recitations, where learners studied and memorized the assignments at home, overemphasizing on verbal answers. And the last one is a test or oral examination. It might be given at the end of a unit, and the process, which was called assignment to study to recitation, and recitation to test, was repeated relying so much on rote memorization. When we say rote memorization, it is memorization with no effort at understanding the meaning. Next, there are four advantages of formal or traditional education, and those are the interactive, motivating, accessible, and organized. Though it is labeled as traditional, there are still recognized advantages of the formal method of instruction. The first advantage is what they call interactive. Interactive is most learners consider the traditional classroom environment beneficial for learning because they can interact with the teacher and their classmates through cooperative activities and group work. The possibility of asking questions and receiving immediate answer is important. And the second one is the motivating. The learning atmosphere of the traditional classroom helps them to stay focused and keeps them motivated. Unlike virtual classrooms, where procrastination can become a common attitude, traditional classrooms preserve a feeling of now and here, all through the learning process. Next, the third one is the accessible. In a traditional classroom environment, learning begins with the teacher sharing his knowledge with learners, and then it proceeds with discussions between the teacher and the learners, and it ends with the new information written in notebooks. For learners and for learners of specializations that have nothing to do with technology, printed courses and books from the library are, in most cases, enough. And the last advantage is the organized. This provides learners with a fixed schedule and specific periods dedicated exclusively to learning, where learners in this situation prefer to be forced to schedule classes first and then plan other activities around them. Next, so now let's proceed to the alternative learning system, or what they call ALS. ALS is a ladderized, modular non-formal education program in the Philippines for dropouts in elementary and secondary schools, out-of-school youths, non-readers, working Filipinos, and even senior citizens. It is part of the education system of the Philippines but an alternative to the regular classroom studies where Filipino learners are required to attend daily. The ALS is a free education program implemented by the Department of Education, which it benefits those who cannot afford formal schooling and follows whatever is their available schedule. The program provides a viable alternative to the existing formal education instruction, encompassing both the non-formal and informal sources of knowledge and skills. To familiarize ourselves better about alternative learning system, let's proceed to the advantages of alternative learning system. Next, though ALS may require expensive training, the qualifications of teachers are not even clear that classes can be less intense than in standard schools. The first one, it provides more educational opportunities for Filipino citizens of different interests, capabilities of demographic characteristics, socio-economic origin, and status, as well as addressing the needs of the marginalized groups. The second one, The program cuts the time needed to finish elementary or high school. Hence, it significantly cuts the expenses as well. Yes, this program will probably cut the time needed because the learners of us needs 10 months or 800 hours to go to school, unlike to the standard schools where it takes how many years to finish their elementary or high school years. Next, next. The third one, it gives hope to the less fortunate and provide opportunities to out-of-school youths and adults, elementary and secondary school dropouts, non-readers, even senior citizens wanting to read and write, industry-based workers, domestic engineers, maids, factory workers, driver, member of cultural minorities, indigenous people, and person with disabilities challenge. Next, the program has two different schematics for conducting instruction, which they call the school-based instructions and the formal instruction. When we say school-based instructions, it conducted in school campuses and the community-based program, while the formal instructions, it is conducted in community halls or on private places. The ALS program follows uniform lesson modules for all academic subjects covering the sciences, mathematics, English, Filipino, social studies, current event, among others. Program administration is held by the Department of Education. Private non-government organization may deliver the program but still under the supervision of the Philippine Education Agency. As what I have said earlier, in ALS, the learners have to attend 10 months of school or 800 hours in the classroom, then assessed by their learning facilitators. And if they are ready, they are given the accreditation and equivalency, paper and pencil-based test, using multiple choice and composition writing covering all learning competencies of the 5 learning strands in the ALS curriculum. The test aims to offer learners two learning achievements at 2 learning levels, which are the elementary and the secondary. Successful examinees are then given certificates equivalent to a diploma in the formal school for the elementary or secondary level. ALS officials and implementers may option to conduct a graduation ceremony to indicate that learners have successfully finished the program. Next, there are 3 categories of ALS, which are the non-formal education, the informal education, and the mobile teacher. The first one is the non-formal education. Non-formal education is purely a correspondence course. It provides classes in summer institutes, postal tuition, television programs, radio programs, teaching machines, program instruction, open universities, distance education, and etc. Thus, non-formal education fulfills different objectives like imparting knowledge, developing different skills, and promoting values among the learners. The UNESCO Commission on Education 1972 in its report, Learning to Be, stressed on non-formal education because a large number of people are preoccupied with the work of earning. They do not receive the desired education. People should be provided an opportunity for studying privately in their leisure hours. Non-formal education is a systematic, deliberate, and planned activity organized outside the 4 walls of the classroom. According to UNESCO 2010, non-formal education helps to eradicate illiteracy among adults, ensures equal access to education, and improve women access to vocational training, science, technology, and continuing education. and it also encourages the development of non-discriminatory education and training. Next, the second one is the informal education. Informal education consists of learning activities that are voluntary and self-directed, lifelong, and motivated mainly by intrinsic interest, curiosity, exploration, manipulation, fantasy, task completion, and social interaction. Informal learning occurs in an out-of-school setting and can be linear or non-linear, and often is self-paced and visual or object-oriented. It provides an experiential base and motivation for further activity and learning. The outcomes of informal learning experiences in science, mathematics, and technology include a sense of fun and wonder, in addition to a better understanding of concepts, topics, processes of thinking in scientific and technical disciplines, and an increased knowledge about career opportunities in these fields. Informal education is also called incidental education. It takes place both consciously and unconsciously. It is not systematic, pre-planned, and it is not confined to a place and time, unlike to the previous category. It is casual and gained through daily experience, work, and activity. Next, to know how informal education differs from formal, non-formal education. Let's study below what informal, formal, and non-formal education is. When it comes to goal, the formal education aims are well fixed in advance, and in informal education, no predetermined aims. And in non-formal education, it has clear-cut aims in sight. When it comes to age limit, in formal education, it started at the particular age. It is continued and thus over the years it is completed. While in the informal education, no age limit for the start or completion of this type of education. It is never going and never ending process. And in the non-formal education, it also no age limit. A person of any age group can enter in this setup and continue his studies. Next, when it comes to result, the formal education, it's always good education because everything is pre-planned and the process of education goes in under supervision. While in informal education, it may result into negative learning because the learner may acquire certain bad habits, wrong attitudes, and etc. While in non-informal education, sometimes it is good and sometimes it is not good because it is partly formal and partly informal. Next, next is the work schedule. In formal education and non-formal education, it is fixed, while in the informal education, it is not fixed. Rules and regulations. Rules and regulations in formal education are there. Obedience of those is mandatory for all the learners of that school. In informal education, there is no rules and regulations. So there is no question of obedience of those rules and regulations. In non-formal education, sometimes rules and regulations are observed. It is based upon part-time and own timetable. When it comes to restrictions, in formal education, restricted type of freedom is given to the learners and the teacher. In informal education, all freedom is given to the teachers and the learners. And in non-formal education, there is no restrictions that observed. It is self-imposed or inner discipline. Next. In organizing body, in formal education, it always organized type of education. some organized body is behind the establishment of the school. In informal education, it is unorganized of education. There is no organized body behind or in the background. In non-formal education, there is an organized body behind or in the background. When it comes to time bond or the syllabus, the formal education, the syllabus is completed. In informal education, there is no syllabus and there is no question of completing the syllabus. In informal education, there is a syllabus here and time period is defined to complete the syllabus. Next. When it comes to qualification of teacher, in formal education, only a qualified person can act as a teacher and his duty is to impart education. And in informal education, anybody may act as a teacher in a situation. Even the students may sometimes play the role of a teacher in some situation. In non-formal education, qualified person is required to impart education. On the other hand, electronic medias are used also to impart education. And in the process of teaching, in formal education, artificial way of teaching, learning. And in informal education, natural type of teaching, learning. And in informal education, both natural as well as artificial for sometimes. Next, in the rule, in formal education, conscious efforts are made both by the teacher and the learner in the process of teaching learning. And in formal education, no conscious efforts are made by the teacher and the learner. And in the non-formal education, learner is more active than the teacher. Conscious efforts are made by both, but learner is more active compared to the teacher. And in the means, formal education, proper means are used to achieve the goals. And in formal education, no proper means are used. And in non-formal education, proper means are used but to some extent. Next, mental strain. In formal education, it leads to the mental strain. And in formal education, being natural does not strain the learner. And in non-formal education, it involves only limited mental strain. In setup, in the formal education, formal type of setup. Here all type of formalities are observed. And in formal education, no formalities are observed. In non-formal education, partly formal and partly informal. And when it comes to the entry, in formal education, it has fixed point of entry and exit. And in formal education, there is no question of entry and exit. And in non-formal education, it has flexible points of entry and exit, re-entry and re-exit throughout the life. Next, the timetable. The timetable of the formal education is always a formal type of timetable in the vogue during the process of teaching learning. And in informal education, no timetable is fixed. Things happen out of chance or by mere luck as they say. In non-formal education, timetable is fixed, but there are not rigid. Flexible timetable is there. Next is the place. In formal education, school is a fixed place. And in the informal education, place is not fixed to impart education. And in the non-formal education, place is fixed for some time. Next, the last category of the owls is what they call the mobile teacher. Mobile teachers are specialized teachers who live among the people in remote barangays of the country, conduct the BLP for illiterate out-of-school youth and adults who are willing to learn basic literacy skills. Accreditation of equivalency for those who left formal school system or have no access to schools. Mobile learning is more complex, since the role of the teachers in mobile learning is not comparable with the role of teachers in school television. Before school television, the main role of the teacher was the role of the domain expert that presents relevant information to the learners who are considered as novices who need to learn. This kind of school television has been replaced by concepts such as those of the Discovery Channel, which is more related to concepts incorporated to the TV's Sesame Street or the German Sendang mit der Maus, which has been later coined as infotainment. Next, duties and responsibilities of all mobile teachers are as follows. The first one is conduct of learning sessions with the learners. Second one is develop literacy and other related skills based on the ALS competences. The third one is establish functional networking and reporting system. And the fourth one is conduct action research activity and other related functions. The moderating teacher holds the key for which information is selected and accessible to the learners, would guide the learners back to the scope, forbid the switch to other contexts, and kill the transition of learning processes to the other context, in order to respond to the learner's change, rule, and responsibility. The role of the teacher changes slowly towards the role of the consultant. In this rule, teachers need to be able to identify the learner's interests, relate this interest to topic-related learning goals, and offer opportunities to reach these goals that are related to the specific conditions of a learner. Such integration implies that teachers may face that learners consult different persons in order to meet their goals. That is only my part, and now let me call on Mr. Christian Jimar Ladao to discuss the alternative delivery mode.
Good day, everyone. I am Christian Jemar Yuladao, and today I will discuss to you the alternative delivery mode or ADM. Next. So, ADM is an alternative modality and is being done within the confines of the normal system that allows school to deliver education to marginalized learners and those at risk of dropping out in order to help them overcome personal, social, and economic contexts in schooling. So in ADM, the subjects are based on 8 learning areas. These are math, science, English, Filipino, Araling Panlipunan, computer, music, and sining pantahanan. Next. So it also refers to the non-traditional education program recognized by the Department of Education or DepEd, which applies. It is a flexible learning philosophy and currently delivery program that includes non-formal and informal source of knowledge and skill. So it makes use of modularized instruction material, but which are articulated with the formal basic education curriculum. To widen the access of marginalized and disadvantaged the learner quality basic education, the Department of Education implement the alternative delivery modes in the formal education system in both an elementary and secondary level. So the primary So these are the primary aim of or the following principles of ADM. So first is the basic education is free and shall be accessible to all. Second, education is a right of every and individual. Third, education is inclusive and not discriminating. And lastly, stakeholders' participation is integral to the child development. Next. So ADM caters to both primary and secondary education. So in primary education, we have the modified in-school and off-school approach or MESOSA and electronic instructional management by parents, community, and teachers or e-impact. For secondary education, we also have the Open High School Program or OHSP. So next slide, please. So first is modified in school and off school approach or MESOSA. So MESOSA is a program developed by Bureau of Elementary Education or BEE and pilot in 14 schools in 2005. So MESOSA aims to first is to access for quality education. Next is to solve congestion in school with big enrollment. Second is to address the needs of children for adequate learning materials. Mobilize and strengthen community support. And last is to improve learners' performance. The next slide. The MESOSA is implemented in a large class with more than 50 learners in grade 4, 5, and 6 to address the perennial problem of congestion resulting from lack of classroom, shortage of teachers, overpopulation, and other factors in technology enhanced ADM, which enables schools to deliver elementary education despite of the lack of teachers, classroom, and other concerns. So MESOSA method makes use of modular instructional material in different learning areas. Given the frequency of MESOSA classes, progress of the student is being monitored through attendance, periodical tests based on both classroom discussion and off-school modules. And the children are being required to comply their short quiz into a portfolio. So next slide. So there is a two group under the MESOSA. So first is the in-school group. So this is a typical classroom setup. So the students is in school in a classroom setting. So next is the off-school group. Off-school group is given the flexibility to learn and do activities independently or with a learning facilitator. So in this setup, students are learn based in their home. So they are based in their home. So next. So we will move to the next. The enhanced instructional management by parents, community, and teachers or e-impact learning system. So this learning system is a technology-enhanced alternative delivery mode developed by the CIMIO Regional Center for Educational Innovation and Technology, or ENOTech, to address issue in accessibility and quality of education in school, usually handled by a few teachers teaching multi-grade classes. The learning system follows a set of principles to guide implementation. Foremost is the recognition that children are active participants in the learning process. So it also a principle uphold through the use of learning module based on the RBEC. So next slide. So through impact, SIMIO wants to address the problem in education in the Philippines. Public school systems such as lack of classroom, teachers, and textbook, high dropout rate, and low budget allocated for education. The impact system use a peerly lead approach to enhance learner skills and capacities them with relevant lessons to reach their fullest potential. So a system in which the parents, community, and even the learners themselves collaborate and cooperate with the school toward an access and a quality education. So next slide. So this is the graphic organizer that provides an in-depth understanding of the difference between two alternative delivery learning modes. So first is the background of the innovative features, MISOSA and impact. So the acronym is the MISOSA is the modified in school of school approach. E-impact is the instructional management by parents, community, and teachers. So the description is mean. So under the MISOSA is its description is meant to be address the problem of congestion, also for seasonal absentees, those living in conflict or disaster area, chronically ill, indigenous children, and those engaged in earning a living to the family income. So the description of impact is meant to address issue of both access and quality by enabling school to deliver complete levels from grade 1 to grade 6 despite shortage of teachers and classroom. So we will move to their scheme school type. So in MISOSA, implemented in large class with more than 50 students in grade 4, 5, and 6, while in impact, community learning center is space for small group learning like cases for level from grade 1 to grade 6. So means, so make use of self-instructional material in the different learning area which learner can work on independent in venue other than regular classroom, while in impact, modular instructional materials. So scheme. In MISOSA, each class is grouped into two, the in-school group with the classroom subject teacher and the off-school group. And in impact, child may go through each module individual or with a peer group of program teacher. So next, so Open High School Program. Open High School Program is an alternative mode of formal secondary education for both public and private school, run by the Bureau of Secondary Education of the Department of Education of the Republic of the Philippines. The program provides an opportunity for elementary school graduates, learners who are unable to start or complete secondary education through the problem of time, distance, physical impairment, financial difficulties, social or family problem, and successful examinees of the Philippine Education Placement Test. So next slide. So, so is so Open High School Program, high system program is intended for learners who are unable to pursue formal secondary education due to rigid requirement or regular class schedule. It is also alternative for attending regular class, but is also designed to be beneficial to all learners. Most learners may still learn best by attending the regular formal secondary education. The Open High School program is aligned with the school improvement plan's goal of producing functionally literate learner who has a master of basic competence, capable by problem solving, and is productive member of his family and community. So next slide. So the Open High School program as a dropout reduction program or DORP intervention has the following aims. First is to retain school potential dropout. Second is to encourage out of school youth of high school age from 12 up to 16 to return to school. Next is to contribute to the accomplishment of the education for all target, which is 100% participation rate and zero dropout by 2015. And next is lastly is to increase achievement rate through the quality distance education. So the next slide. So the adoption of all these alternative delivery modes will expand to the opportunity of children with special needs to avail education service, compliance of children in high remote and inaccessible areas, and in areas with problem on supply side. This requires necessary enhancement in the existing IT system and overall procedure of the program. So the DepEd supports other local initiatives or effort to widen, improve learners' access to the basic education and address the problems per region, division, or school. So these are the reference we use in creating this PowerPoint presentation or this discussion. That's all. Thank you.